guys ready?
Phone's on, yep.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. It is a public meeting, as has been noted as such. I'd like to start with a pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moment of silence, please. Thank you. No public. Okay. Roll call. Vito? Joe?
I'll do it.
Thank you.
Crosby,
Here.
Erica,
Here.
Jake,
Here.
Gail,
Here.
Dale, Vito,
Here.
Carolyn,
Here.
Craig,
Here.
Cherry. And Dale is excused this evening. We'll wait for Cherry.
Approval of the school board meeting minutes of November 27th, 23rd. If no questions or comments, go by consent. Thank you. Joel, recognitions.
Yes, we have a recognition this evening. The Lynch family of dealerships graciously donated $2,000 towards the annual Parkview in the Dark. The money allowed our visitors to purchase candy for this community event and additional decorations to make the night spooktacular. So we are very grateful for that, and we will send a thank you to them.
Awesome. Thank you, Jake. Professional staff handbook, Rachel.
All right, so you all have a draft of the professional staff handbook. This was presented as an information item last month. And so tonight, opening this up for discussion, just to remind you of some of the context behind this. It was last revised in 2018. We have condensed it to include the variety of addendums that existed around this handbook. We vetted it through our teacher advisory group, our administrator group, as well as our legal counsel to make sure that it is in line with all of the federal and state policies. I went over the high leverage changes, but additionally, as you can see as you went through it, all of the green is the additions that we're suggesting. The red are things that we would like to redact, and black is anything that is already approved. So opening this up to questions that you have about the suggestions, and then our timeline is that we would bring this back to you in January for a recommendation to adopt.
Any questions? Erica, you're thinking.
Well, because I had one earlier, and of course I didn't write it down, so I'm looking for it. But I just would like to acknowledge the amount of work that was put into this, Rachel. Like, this is hefty work, so I just want to thank you for your dedication to all of this. And the links, I know that that's to update the policies as they go. Huge benefit. So, one, thank you for all of your work on this. And if I find it, I will let you know.
Okay, thank you.
All good? Thanks,
All right.
Rachel.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Calendar discussions. That'd be Dr. Cook. Oh, Rachel again? Sorry, Rachel.
Yep, nope, that's okay. So again, last month we brought forth the recommended calendar for the 24-25 school year. The only change that you'll see based on the last draft that we showed to you in this draft is that we are recommending that the conference dates in the fall be changed from we originally had them on the 16th and the 22nd. We're recommending that those be moved to the 17th and the 23rd. The teacher feedback around that was really just that they have a long night of conferences on the 17th, and then they only have Friday to get through. And then on the 23rd, they have that professional development day on the 24th, and then off on the 25th. So just kind of minimizing, the long weeks, those weeks. Everything else remained the same. We are still looking at the June 8th graduation date for seniors, but everybody else would finish on that June 11th. And again, this calendar is in compliance with the Department of Public Instruction instructional minutes. And so this is open for discussion with a recommendation that we would look to adopt this at the December 18th board meeting.
Any discussion?
I have a question.
Sherry?
For the 17th and the 23rd of October, those are, kids are in school those days.
Kids are in school
I'm
those
just
days.
looking at my color coding, and I was
Yep.
trying to sort it out.
Nope, that's okay. Yeah,
then-
kids are in school those days.
Okay, and then also on January 29th and 30th?
Kids are in school those days as well. Those are just the open house nights for our middle school and our high school.
Okay. So they're not, I was trying to decide if that was a flex color.
Nope, there's just only so many shades of purple and so many shades in the calendar that we could choose from, but yes.
And then on March, there's a green one. March
March
11th.
11th is the ACT statewide test day. So juniors are the only ones that report to the high school.
Okay.
All other students, K-8, still report to school.
Okay. Okay, that was it.
Sherika?
Do we have, if this passes, a plan already put in place to inform parents about this change for the 2-hour early release being quarterly? Because this is a big change that everyone's used to for a long time. So putting it out here now for people to start paying attention to, if we vote on this next week, these 4 2-hour early release days is a big change. So what is the strategy behind letting everybody know?
We will be doing a district-wide email if that is approved to all families, and then we will keep it as an update in all of the key newses for the remainder of the year. It'll be a standing piece, plus reminders this summer going into next school year.
Can we like text that out to everybody?
We will use,
Like with a Google Calendar link or something, because that's a big one, and they're so easy to miss in the emails and the show points. Like this one's going to have to be like.
and anything going in, like if the calendar is approved, all of those early releases, we will be communicating the weeks leading up to those to remind parents that this Thursday is an early release. This Thursday is an early release. And we'll be working with our childcare providers on those days to make sure, similar to what we do now on Wednesday, that there's care in place on those Thursdays.
Okay. And do we need to be making motions to move these forward to the full board meeting next week for approval? Both the calendar and the handbook.
The handbook won't be coming forward for approval until January.
Okay.
And we'll bring this forward as an action item on the December 18th agenda.
We don't need to make a motion to move it forward as a committee.
We haven't,
Forward? We haven't been doing that.
we haven't been doing that for our prior committee of the whole meetings.
Okay.
The only action that we've taken, or vote that we have taken, has been on the personnel matters since we ironed that out earlier this year.
Correct. I wasn't looking for action tonight. That's not what my question was.
Yeah, we haven't voted to move forward.
I think we have. Because we always did in our committees, when we had our committees before, we always would vote to move it to full board. And so I think we've always been making a motion to move it to the full board, but I may be wrong.
We haven't done that the last,
I thought we were
Four
just
months.
recommending to the, I don't,
Yeah, I don't.
Because we're all here, we don't have
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, now that we bring it up, I don't think we've
We have.
made motions to move stuff to the full board.
Not since we've been in a.
Okay, but then what if we're not wanting something as a committee to move forward for vote? Or then what are we doing there? We're just
We just tell them no.
dropping it, that we're not taking any official voting to not move it forward?
there have been items that have been tabled for another month, where you as a committee have asked for more information from us, so we haven't brought it back 2 weeks later for a vote.
Yeah.
We have kept items on the agenda through the director's report to the board. So for instance, like if we weren't voting on something like the handbook, next week, the handbook discussion will be on the director's report for personnel. But it wouldn't be an agenda item next month, or next week.
So sorry, I guess it's a point of order question. If we want something to never come back, if we're like, we're done with this, we're not talking about it again, don't bring it to full board to vote on, what is the process then in place? If we're not voting to move something forward, how are we moving forward in a way to not bring something back?
The committee could always take action to table an item to either a specific meeting or indefinitely. And there's a timeline based off of Robert's rules that we would follow, where if it was never brought back, it would eventually die and then need to be brought back at a future date.
Erica, is there something that you want to,
No, I just wanted to make
Okay,
sure that
okay.
if we need to vote to move it forward, that I did, so that we
Okay.
can vote on it next week.
Okay, very good then. Number 2 on the student learning topics, Parkview scheduled to add math minutes.
Is there a reason that we're moving to 2 without doing?
Oh, yeah, sorry, Luke, you sit back down, Luke, I apologize. Let's go to 4K recommendation for 24-25, I apologize.
So last year about this time, the board voted to do a pilot program, trying 4K full day at Clarendon Avenue and Big Bend, as well as keeping our AM and PM site at Prairie View Elementary. Given that we don't know the state of moving forward or not with a referendum or what will happen with the referendum, our recommendation is that we stay status quo for another year with our 4K programming. We've gotten super great feedback from Clarendon and Big Bend for our full day programs. I do feel like they are going extremely well, but to expand at this point or detract at this point and look for another partner site just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense.
Sherry?
So how are you going to do the selection the same as you did last year then?
The plan would be to do the selection the same. I would say I know there was a lot of talk at first. Once we put the process into place, there was very little feedback once it went out who had gotten the placements or not, in a negative sense. So there's no compelling reason that we would have to change that.
Because if I remember correctly, we had almost an entire class that was on a waiting list, and so we can't go for, and we said, oh, it's a pilot. Well, now we can't really say it's a pilot because.
What's interesting about that, though, is when spots opened up and we started calling people to take the spots, there was not a full waiting list at that point for taking the spots. Now, it may be that people, came up with other plans in the meantime or decided to do things, but it was interesting to me when we would have spots open in our full-day programs, that they would sit for a period of time, or we'd have to go down a list to necessarily find one. So I would assume we will have a list at first for a full-day program again, just given the popularity of that. But again, overall, I would say the process went very smoothly.
But we wouldn't call it a pilot.
Correct.
Call it a series. Never mind. All good, Sherry? Thank you, Stephanie.
Yep.
Hey, Luke, let's look at Parkview Middle School schedule and add math minutes. Oh, hang on a minute, Luke. I'm kidding. Go ahead.
Good evening. Thanks for having me tonight. I just want to provide an update on the Parkview Middle School bell schedule, the classes that we offer within that schedule, and some changes that we are looking to make for the upcoming 23-24 school year. Had to think about that for a second. So 23-24 school year. 24-25 school year. Thank you. Wow, that seems crazy to say. Okay, so just to provide some history and context of our schedule at Parkview Middle School. Before we talk about our current schedule, let me just share some data with you of where our school has been here over the last 5 years. So in the 2018 school year, we had 56.1% of our students that were advanced or proficient on the forward exam. You can see 5 years later, we are at 56.4. So we took quite a significant decrease there over the 1920, I guess, COVID school year, as we did as a district, as most of the state did as well. And we've kind of spent the last 2 years digging ourselves out of that hole. We were proud last year to finally get out of that hole with 2 pretty good years, but unfortunately we're still kind of level of where we were 5 years ago in math. English, our story is a little bit different. In the 18-19 school year, we were at 50.5% proficient. We did not take the same decrease in English as we did with math. We've had 2 good years here again over the last couple of years, but when you compare the last 5-year trends there, we're up 14% in English as compared to very minimal growth in math. So again, just going back to the 18-19 school year. So in 18-19, our ELA proficiency, our English Language Arts proficiency, was 50.5, and our math proficiency was 56.1. At that point, or right around that point, we made a schedule change at Parkview Middle School to add more reading minutes, add more English Language Arts minutes. So rather than having a single period of English at Parkview, we currently have what we call a double block. Students have 90 minutes every day of English. Every other content area, most other content areas in our building are 90 minutes every other day. English, we decided to double up due to the importance of English and due to what our scores at the time were telling us. In addition to that, the district made a decision that we were going to hire full-time instructional coaches at each of our buildings, Parkview included. And over the last 5 years, we've put a fair amount of work with our teachers and on school-wide literacy and vocabulary to ensure that all students have a base foundation there with both literacy and vocabulary. In the last 5 years, again, how have those numbers changed? So we went from English scores being 6 points lower, 5.5 points lower, to now our English scores are almost 8 points higher than our math scores due to the work that our staff has put in for English. So I'm sitting here today telling you that I think we owe it to our students to look at our schedule again and potentially do something different to help our students make up. Don't look at me, I'm okay. To make up that gap, in math. So I'm good. I'm really good. So what we are proposing here is that we're going to add some math minutes to our schedule for next year. And I guess I was going to write, when I originally created this, talk about an instructional coach in math. And I know that this group has talked about that in the month of November, so that piece is already checked off the list. But here's what our current schedule looks like. Again, you can see that we have in the yellow there, we currently have English every other day. We run a every other day block at Parkview. Those blocks are about 90 minutes each. So we have one math there, I put it in red. We have math every other day, and then we have English every day for 90 minutes. What we are looking at doing, I will show you in a second, is increase our math minutes. So we're looking to increase our math minutes from 225 minutes a week up to 338 minutes a week. Full disclosure, that increase in time is coming from English. So we're looking to increase math by those minutes. We're looking to decrease English by a similar amount of minutes. When we were looking at making this decision, we surveyed other neighboring middle schools, 28 neighboring middle schools. The current, what we have, 90 minutes every day in English, was number 1 on the list out of 28 schools. We had the most English minutes of any school in the district. Likewise, our 90 minutes every other day math was 28th on the list. We had the least amount of math minutes out of any of those schools in the area. The average schools in the area, as I said up there, have around 65 to 70 minutes, so that is more similar to what we are looking at moving to or what we're proposing. Also, I guess that last bullet point is important as well. We know within the district we're having conversations about a referendum that could potentially result in a new building or a new structure with a new middle school of 6, 7, 8. At that point, we would obviously have to create a brand new schedule again for a new building. So when we're looking at next year, we're specifically looking at just changing our English and math minutes. We are not looking to do an entire schedule overhaul that would impact all other content areas. We're just looking right now at English and math. So the proposal of what we'd like to do here is move English and math to every day. So one day you would have 90 minutes of English and 45 minutes of math, and the opposite day you would have 90 minutes of math and 45 minutes of English. Kind of going back to other schedule conversations I know this group has had, we value having class every day. That has been hard for our teachers at times to have that every other day class. So we're looking at, again, having a 90 minutes and a 45 minutes every single day. So next steps that we are looking to take here, last month, as I said, this group poured secondary math instructional coach, so thank you for that support. Alyssa is fantastic in that role and will continue to be fantastic in that role. We're looking at utilizing our professional development time on Wednesdays, starting right away here in January, so we can start planning for next year. One of the things that's important is when you go through a schedule change to make sure you provide staff the time to adjust their instruction accordingly. And that's true with both math and English for next year because both of them will have different time structures going into next school year. And then again, we do have instructional coaches in both math and English. So our teachers are currently working with them to, again, realign those lessons to ensure that we are ready to go for the fall. So that is our plan for Parkview. I can flip back to the slide again that shows the 90 and 45. Again, the ones in black are not impacted at all. We're just impacting math and English. Do you have any questions for Stephanie or I? Yeah.
Luke, when we originally added the English minutes, where did that come from?
Stephanie nor I were in our current roles, I don't think. I believe what we did is I think we were an 8-period day, and I think we just switched to a 9-period day. So it came equally from everywhere. So other classes, we probably would have switched from like 8 50-minute periods to like 9 45-minute periods, if that makes sense, roughly.
Okay, thank you.
A big part of that also was science and social studies had been every day. And then when it switched to every other day, it shifted the minutes to allow for more English at the time. That was the Parkview scheduling debacle of 2017.
Yeah, so we actually went through like 3 or 4 schedule changes in a 5-year span.
Yeah.
And when I was hired 6 years ago, the message very clearly from this group was no more schedule changes. And then ironically, 2 or 3 years later when we went into COVID, we did a schedule change to switch to the block. And then when we went to that schedule, we surveyed families and students and staff, and we decided to stay with it because it was favorable from all 3 groups. Of course.
I just want to emphasize too with this one that we are using the data to do this. So I know a schedule change is a big deal and we don't want to go through it on a regular basis, but this one is very much driven by data we're seeing and not waiting for or crossing our fingers that the data is going to change. We think that there's some instructional things need to happen and that middle school students need the math every day in order to see the gains that we want to see. Good news is that in talking to the English teachers, which, you know, we were not looking forward to delivering that message to say to people, you've worked really, really, really hard and your scores have gone up as much as they have, and now we're gonna take that time away, didn't feel like a good message, but I would have to say that our English team understands. I mean, they're in the building with kids. They understand the need for more math minutes and daily math. And as a result, they're having some great instructional discussions on where is it that we can skim back and not impact student learning. And so we're seeing them really dig in, as they always do, and have some great conversations about how we don't take steps back now in English in order to do this. And I don't think that will be the case.
Erica.
So one of the things in the presentation for the ELA numbers was an emphasis on school-wide literacy and vocabulary. And I remember all of the content areas getting retrained on how to incorporate the literacy part into their content areas. How much do you think that has impacted these scores versus just the minute increase? Because I can't imagine we're able to do that with math in the same way.
I mean, obviously, we believe it had a huge impact in order to do that. That really the building, I mean, I was there when Luke went over report card scores and had a celebration with his staff. And one of the things that Luke talked about with the staff is everybody owns this literacy score going up on some level because of the work we've done as all of the departments and digging into some of that, so.
So what really creative way can we do that with math in all content areas? This is the grade you have to get on the test in order to keep an A. Like, my kids do that all day long.
So I would answer that, I guess, a couple ways. One, I think just as a district and as a school, we're at a different spot with understanding our impact in teaching. So I think, yes, I think a science teacher, for example, in a lab that I observed today can add a math element to it. And I think the same is true with social studies in terms of reading graphs. So that would be piece one. I think the other piece of that is, in some ways, it may be easier to move math because we have a math coach. You took a deep breath when I said easier. I think it might be easier in the sense that with English, it truly is 60 teachers. With math, we are talking 5 teachers, we're gonna go up to 7.5 math teachers. So I think we have a math coach directly working with 7.5 teachers. When we're talking the English piece, we're talking one instructional coach for 55 staff members. That direct impact, that ability to be in a classroom and actually observe and coach all 55 people is a real challenge. That is a large job, whereas from a math lens, Alyssa has been really intimately involved with our secondary staff, both at the middle school and I think at the high school as well. So I feel confident.
Just want to mention one more thing, because Luke just mentioned staffing. We are doing this staff neutral. So like he just mentioned, adding more math teachers, that actually comes from English. We will not have to do layoffs, and we will not have to add staffing FTE to the middle school. So also an important thing to mention.
Carolyn?
I know we had talked about our flex time and advisory time at some point, and I don't know where we ended up with that discussion on what we're gonna be doing next year with the flex and advisory, but have we discussed removing that extra flex and advisory time that the middle school and the high school has to gain those instructional minutes?
So we're definitely digging into those conversations at the high school. And when we come back and talk about that schedule that we're proposing, we're having those discussions. At the middle school, currently, we did not. We feel like the help that the students are getting during that time in the transition from an elementary school where they're with one teacher a day and can get that help consistently to the middle school, we haven't looked at that. That's something that we would, that obviously if we're in a position down the road where we're bringing in another grade level, we'd have those discussions at that time.
And then are we gaining instructional time with removing the early releases on Wednesdays, or did we just?
Yes.
That's coming in too? Okay.
Yep.
So what are we doing with those minutes then? Is that just evenly dispersed throughout everything?
Correct.
Okay.
So currently what our schedule looks like is those 90-minute blocks are 90 Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Wednesday is like 83, 82, somewhere in there. So
Okay.
it's 8 extra minutes per block,
Everything gets a little.
once a
more.
week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Stephanie, Luke, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, student service topics. Update on bullying and harassment data. Christine?
All right, so I just wanted to bring the board an update on our bullying and harassment numbers to date for 2023. I have been trying to bring regular updates around behavior. We did the AODA update. We've done the PBIS everyday major minor conversation in our schools, and then those major violations that we've had. And bullying and harassment is a topic also that I feel like we hear a lot about, and so I wanted to bring an update to the committee regarding bullying and harassment. So when you're first looking at the definitions between bullying and harassment, if you look between the two, you'll see that they feel very similar and oftentimes are interchangeable in certain circumstances. And often I think we hear them used interchangeably. But the biggest difference between bullying and harassment is that harassment piece really talks about those protected classes. And so those protective classes would include race, ethnicity, gender, disability, religion, all of those types of pieces. And so that is really where we focus on that dividing line between what bullying is and what harassment is. So when we get a report that a student has been bullied or harassed, we take that complaint or allegation, and then at that point we interview all the participants, so anybody who might be the victim, the offender, or any witnesses. We make sure that we get statements from those students. We review all of that evidence once we have it, the documentation from the interviews. Sometimes we're looking at emails, social media, Snapchat, and then cameras if we can see anything in our halls or in gyms, wherever it might be happening. We also look at, you guys have done a great job going over all of our board policies, and so we spend time looking at board policy to see which one would apply. Based on that, we determine our consequences, our current evidence, and then any previous history. Sometimes we have a situation where we've had multiple events in the past regarding the same topic, and so then we have a little bit of a less tolerance for continued behavior. We're always making sure to notify parents and guardians, and then of course there's a record of that incident. So between the high school and the middle school, they have spent some time norming behaviors, and so when we're looking at what type of responses the middle school having, we also want to take it into account how the high school is reacting. And so this is just a small snapshot of what a consequence would be, and then what other restorative piece we might be able to have. So for example, we always have reinstatement meetings if a student is suspended. So anytime a student is suspended, a parent has to come in with their child and have a conversation. And I think that's been an important piece of just shaping behavior and increasing accountability on all sides of the conversation. Some of the challenges that we run into for investigation is that social media, oftentimes parents will come or students will come and say they've had an incident that happened. Maybe it is on social media or it's something that happened in the evening. We don't have a lot of control around things that happen outside of school. However, when it becomes a disruption during the school day, then we do have an obligation to investigate. So that can sometimes be a challenge. Social media in itself is just a huge challenge. And so a lot of times we're trying to get evidence, take screenshots. It's really helpful when kids do use the Speak Up, Speak Out app, because then they also they can send snapshots in anonymously. And so that screen capture can be really helpful. Sometimes it can be challenging if there's no hard evidence. So if the social media disappears, or it's a look or a feeling, or like it can sometimes be hard to decipher and get specifically like hard evidence. Sometimes it can be challenging if a length of time has passed. So if somebody were to come forward now and say something happened in September, sometimes going all the way back can be challenging, especially if we're looking for something on camera. And then maintaining just, kids want to remain anonymous, but they are really good at investigating themselves. And so we try really hard to protect our students at all costs when they report something. The biggest person to do that is the student themselves. So just that can sometimes be a challenge as well, especially if a lot of students weren't present. So I just wanted to share with you the trend line for the last 3 years. So the 2021 would have been the pandemic year. So our numbers were lower that year, but if you recall, and everybody does, we didn't go to school from the middle of March until that following fall. So we had less incidents during that year. In the 21-22 school year, we had a total of 77 incidents. And in the 22-23 school year, we had 61. This is K-12 data. So this is not just secondary. So I pulled from everywhere. Then if you move forward to this year, we have 48 instances already. So we might question why so many now when we're not even halfway through the school year. But I think a lot of that is coming from our discipline norming that we're doing between the two schools. And having a pretty low tolerance for repeated behavior. And also the passing of 5600, that policy that we talked about early on, has really helped support and guide some of those decisions regarding bullying and harassment. So thank you guys again for your support around that. And then moving forward, just what are our next steps as we continue to address this issue? So we continue to have professional development for our administrators on what constitutes bullying and harassment, and then really aligning and formatting how we're collecting that evidence, and so that we are using a uniform practice across the system. And then we're also working hard on just cleaning up the data. So when we go into Infinite Campus to record an incident, you have all of these different drop downs. And what we want to really start cleaning up is that bullying is bullying and harassment is really falling under those protected classes. And I think that's just going to clean up the data so it's easier to report and more efficient and reliable data So those are our next steps that we'll continue to do. Like I said, we are working on behavioral norming at our administrative council meetings, and I think those conversations have brought up some really good topics too that are worthy of discussion. Did you guys have any questions? All right, Craig, how many minutes till kickoff?
I don't know, we have business to take care of here.
Okay, Greg. Well, I'm next too. So. You ready for me? No questions?
All good? Non-discrimination self-assessment report.
Okay, so as you guys recall, we have a report that we need to submit to the Department of Public Instruction. That report is due one time every 5 years, and so we had partnered with CISA 6 to help do that report, and it is in the board agenda tonight. If you guys have had a chance to look at it, it's a little lengthy. It has a lot of links in it, so if you haven't, I would encourage you to start digging into that. So I will go through tonight just highlighting that process and then looking at any recommendations that will be made on behalf of the district, steps moving forward. So originally this had to be completed by December 31st. They did extend the timeline until May 30th, but we had it mapped out real tight, and so I was not, we wanted to just continue the pace we were on and finish it up. So the districts are required to do this in 8 specific areas. We do have to encourage participation from a variety of different stakeholders. So after tonight, it will be posted for public review for the following week to get any type of public input, and Ben will help me get that out there to the masses, so to speak, so that people can review it. We do have to prepare that written report, which is also in your packet for examination, again, to the district residents. And then we will submit a copy of that written report to the department. So as soon as we are done, we'll talk about it tonight, and then we'll ask that it be approved next Monday. With that, then we'll go ahead and submit it to the Department of Public Instruction, and we will be done with our 5-year equity report until another 5 years pass. So the areas that we looked at, they are assessing again for non-discrimination. So those areas are looking at board policies, administrative procedures, enrollment trends. So as you're going through the report, you're going to see a lot of links around these things. Methods, practices, we had to look at curriculum. We need to look at what counseling was doing, what kind of assessments were we doing. We looked at disciplinary actions. We looked at trends in athletic and co-curricular activities. We looked at scholarships, recognition, achievement, equality of educational opportunities, and then just really what does our technology look like, including communications to school district, the community, and the staff. So it's a really comprehensive report. More data than I have ever seen on our system, I think, put all together. So key findings, highlights. So there were no major compliance violations at all. The one thing that I felt really good about, and I hope you guys feel good about, is that she said the one thing that really stood out about our district was that our website and our work is incredibly transparent to the public. And I thought that was a good compliment, a nice compliment for all of you, that I know that has been something that you, the board and the district has been striving for, so that really stood out. We did not have any, all of our complaint, non-discrimination policies and complaint procedures were visible and accessible to the public. We have consistent practices, so all that data analysis that Ben and Stephanie do, all of that was readily available. And so there was really a good historical perspective. And then we also have a really great focus on our summer school programming, our frameworks for response to intervention, which is what our MTSS is, which is multi-tiered systems of support. And then our strategic goals for this upcoming year and in the past we have increasing outcomes for students with disabilities. Some recommendations for improvement they really focus on students with disabilities. So we want to make sure that we're working on closing that achievement gap, which is a goal for us over the next 3 years. And then also looking at how we can increase participation in athletics and student activities for students with disabilities. And then making sure that we have a focused assessment on disciplinary measures so that our discipline is equitable across all genders, races, ethnicities. And then there was one other one that she brought up, I don't believe I listed on here, but just things like as our English language, I'll call it English language learners, but our English learners, our population is starting to just build a little bit at a time, wanting to make sure that we have multiple modes. So like, for example, if our free and reduced or our some kind of communication is going home, that we're offering it in English and Spanish, and grow that need as we need to based on our population here in Mukwonago. So our next step is we will review that. Like I said, it will be available for public review. I'll bring it to you guys next Monday for approval, and then we will move forward with those recommendations, and then we will plan all of this again in 5 years. So do you guys have any questions about the report?
And this is a DPI every 5-year, no matter what thing, correct?
Yep.
I have a question. Next
Sure.
time when you have to do it in 5 years, will you need the help of CISA? I mean, now that you've done it, and do you think you can do, not that it matters, I'm just curious as to if it was a learning curve or if it's so difficult that you have to have somebody.
Here's what I'll tell you, it was incredibly time intensive. So even with her helping, I've invested at least 25 to 30 hours meeting with her. So if I was also putting all the links in and creating the actual report, I don't know. I'm hoping I don't have to think about it for another 5 years, Jerry, but thank you for bringing that forward. I do have a solid template now. So I think that I could do it knowing we have over 40 pieces of evidence collected. So 40 links, 40 things that had to be taken out.
So that's what I didn't know if it was like, you can duplicate it, you know what I'm saying?
I think so.
Because like with the superintendent evaluation, because we had gone through that process,
Mm-hmm.
and so then we knew it, and now with different people, we are doing the same thing again because it gets lost in,
Sure.
you only do it every 5 years, you don't necessarily get used to doing it, you know?
Yeah, and assuming the target doesn't change, right? So DPI sometimes changes what it expects from us, sometimes day to day. And so assuming that the template stayed the same, I'm sure I could replicate it.
Okay.
But I also wouldn't turn down help. I'm not gonna
I
lie.
just was curious as to how complicated it was.
I appreciate the question. Any other questions?
Thank you, Christine.
All right, excellent.
Finance and top facilities, MASD health plan performance, Tom?
Yep, I'll pull up an exhibit on the screen here real quick. At the last meeting, Dale had asked, how are we doing? So we are in a spot now, we're getting closer to present some of this information, so we're gonna take a first stab at it here tonight. So up on the screen then, give me a second. All right, so we have 3 columns of data here. You can see that in 22-23, these are the first 5 months of cost. And give me a second here as I just make this a little bit bigger here. There we go. All right. So we have the first 3 columns. In 22-23, these are the costs that we incurred last year through 5 months of data. So through 5 months, through the end of November, we had spent $3.5 million on insuring, for health purposes, 396 employees and their dependents, okay? The annualized cost of that through then at a 12-month rate was $8.4 million throughout the entire year, all right? Which at the average cost was $21,266 per employee per year. We were given a 35% rate increase from Anthem, and you know that's what they asked for. We ultimately didn't go that route, but we probably could have negotiated down to 25%. So that's just a number we picked. But had we renewed and had that cost grown by 25%, instead of the $3.5 million that we have here, it would be $4.3 million. On an annualized basis, that's $10.3 million or $26,000 per employee per year. So you can see really the insured premium is the biggest line item there. So when you're fully insured, we say, hey, here's the money, you insure us. If there's, if you need more money to pay our claims, that's your loss. If you're collecting more money from us than is required, well, that's your gain. The risk and reward is with the insurance carrier. In a fully insured environment now, that's on us, and really this line here of medical claims at $912,000, if we have unfortunate situations, and life is unfortunately filled with those, if a number of people get some high cost diseases that they're going to treat them with, that's our risk as a district right now, is fully insured. That whatever the medical claims are, is that we bear that responsibility financially speaking. Through 5 months, we've spent 2.3, almost $2.4 million. On an annualized cost basis, we think that's going to be about 5.6, almost $5.7 million. The average cost thus far has been $14,887. So as we compare where we are now to where we were last year, we are 30% lower than last year, and had we renewed with Anthem at 25% more, we're currently saving 43% more. What I do just want to caution, these numbers are very good, right? These are very good numbers from a financial lens. There's a number of people who, and I can even say I'm one of those people myself. If you hit your deductible last year as a fully insured member, you can go to the doctor as many times as you want once you hit that limit, and there's no out-of-pocket cost to you. So a lot of people who hit that in April, May, or June went to the doctor, got their prescriptions refilled, whatever it might be, and then they can avoid going to the doctor for another 6-8 months. So we have a number of people, and that's just human behavior, a number of people who have not accessed our health plan, have not utilized our clinic, haven't had a need to go. But that will, over time, utilization will always go up. At some point, doctor visits are necessary for most. So I just expect that the medical claims here will tick upwards, and that these savings, while we'll still have some, I just don't think they'll be that good. These numbers are great, but I don't want the board to think we're going to sustain this. I think there's going to be savings. The question is to what extent, but the early returns are very good. So any questions I can answer for anybody right now. Jake?
So there's always a bit of a cyclical nature to this, and you think that may be exaggerated slightly because of the transition to a new plan?
Yeah, I think yes. I mean, even with our new plan, I think change in life is not preferred, generally speaking, right? You used to have one network of medical providers, now you have a different one. And then sometimes you say, you know what, I'm not going to think about it, out of sight, out of mind. I just avoid it because the change is there, and that at some point does change. So I do foresee an increase in utilization by our plan members. So as I said earlier, there's a lag of usage, and that lag will expire at some point, and then we'll kind of be hitting our normal stride as we stick with this. But some of these numbers appear better than they probably will be when I come back and do this again in the spring.
So that's quite a bit of savings. I mean, 4.6 potentially. At what point do you assume that's going to be the case? What do we have to see before we build that into the budget, if that makes sense?
I think that we'll ultimately know this spring. I think in a good segue, because we're going to talk about next year's budget. I've started to build the 24-25 budget, assuming that what we set aside right now for medical costs won't go up. In the past, we'd say it's going to go up 10%, 15%. We got to set some money aside here because that's the cost in the market. That's no longer the case at this time. Things can change, but I don't anticipate that's going. We could even reduce this expense and then create more opportunity within the budget for what priorities do you have? What priorities do those three ladies over there, ideas do they bring? Math coaches, school resource officers, you name it. We'll have those opportunities, I believe, to do things like that.
It's just how much of this do we have to see before we feel confident that it's...
I'd say when we...
Is it a couple years? Is it...
No. So I think this is true. Again, as I said earlier, people go through medical episodes. Cancers are expensive, right? When you're self-insured, you set aside some money, And you hope that that amount of money is enough to pay all the claims that'll come through. There's going to be some bad years in this, no doubt about it. So we'll proactively plan for that and be prepared to handle that. But you know, even as early as this spring, we can say, hey, we're 8 months in, 9 months in. We know pretty good where we're going to land at this point. So as we plan ahead and we budget build, you know, we will make an assumption how much should we put in next year's budget for health insurance purposes, and then we'll have that conversation here. So.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anybody else? Thank you, Tom.
Yep.
Number 2, spring referendum sample ballot question.
Okay. So we're coming back here tonight with some, as a follow-up to the information and data that Bill Foster from School Perceptions shared with us. Okay. So ultimately what we have now is a sample ballot question to bring to you, and I'll get to that in just a second here. As we summarize the data here that we got from Bill, what we saw in that, and I'm really going high level with this here right now, 65% of all of our residents, as we talked about the needs of the district, really with a focus on the middle school on that particular question, along with the 4K expansions, 65% of residents supported the district pursuing a referendum and moving on to this next phase of the facility plan. Once we attached a dollar value to those things, and that dollar value being $102.3 million, 63% of the residents who responded supported that. Now, we extrapolated that data out, knowing that, you know, if X number percent of our 3,200 survey respondents, most were, you know, parents in the district who generally vote in favor of. When we say, okay, if 75% of all folks are residents who don't work in the district and don't have kids in the district, and 25% of the people who show up on vote day have kids in the district or do work for the district, we project that question would be at 53.5%. That's the information we heard. So there seems to be support. There's a majority support for the middle school /4K question. As for the additional project at Mukwonago High School to expand career and technical education courses and to expand a multi-purpose indoor facility, of the survey results, 47.5% said they would support that, so it's in the minority. When you took the survey results from the survey and say, okay, if these results are indicative of the community and 25% of the community that shows up is a district, has kids in the district or works in the district, and 75% just live here with no kids or no direct connection, then we think that would land at 39%. So I think one thing to talk about here is we've asked 2 questions. The school board, you can ask 2 referendum questions in a 12-month calendar year. If you ask 2 questions, you can't ask a third later in the calendar year. You can't ask a fourth. You got 2 questions per year. So that state law came up here just a couple years ago. So if you ask a question, you want to be confident that it's going to be correct, or you know that you anticipate the results you're seeking. So as a conversation here with the board tonight is, I think, you know, my recommendation here, my personal feelings aside, for anyone that knows me, is that you put the high school question on pause for the time being, but based on the results of the survey and how the community is indicating their feelings for that $102.3 million project, that's worth pursuing and letting the community control the outcome of that. Do you guys want to have discussion about that? I guess more or less, because we heard the data from Bill, and here we are.
I think the Parkview Middle School was built in 1910 or whatever. I mean, everybody knows it's a not great learning atmosphere. I think that's the education piece of it. People understand that's important. That's my opinion.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Are we looking for opinions, or are we making a decision?
Well, ultimately, at the next meeting, if you would like, we will look to ultimately approve two resolutions through action, official action at the board. And one is to say we are giving permission to go to a referendum specifically for this. And it's really this question here. I think, you know, I wanted to make sure that we at least had the opportunity to talk about things, you know, and that we didn't just assume as administration, well, here's what you guys want. Like, I don't want that. You know, ultimately, it's your action here that will potentially take next week. But this really boils down to this question here. If we're going to move forward with the middle school project, I'll read this out loud. So we worked on this on a couple different drafts. This is where we landed. Shall the Mukwonago Area School District, Waukesha and Walworth Counties, Wisconsin, be authorized to issue pursuant to Chapter 67 of the Wisconsin statutes, general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $102,300,000 for the public purpose of paying the cost of a school building and facility improvement project consisting of construction of a new middle school, including site improvements, renovations and site improvements at Big Bend Elementary School, renovations at Clarendon Avenue, Prairie View, Rolling Hills, and Section Elementary Schools, demolition of the existing Parkview Middle School, district-wide capital maintenance, infrastructure and site improvements, and acquisitions of furnishings, fixtures, and equipment. So that is the question that we feel encompasses the work that's been discussed regarding a new middle school and the renovations of 4K spaces at our traditional elementary schools, which are all of our elementary schools excluding Eagleville. Are we comfortable here with that question? Do you have any concerns about that at this time?
Erica?
Just a clarifying question.
Yep.
So the last referendum we did was two separate questions. One was for the construction and one was for maintenance funds, but that would sunset over a period of time. So we're not asking for that with this. We're just asking for what's needed for the
Correct.
building. So I guess I'm asking what then the district-wide capital maintenance refers to.
Sure. So when we go through the work we'll do for 4K purposes, let me back up for a quick
Hey,
second.
Tom. Kurt, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I do want, I'm sorry, Kurt. I
Sorry,
wanted
no,
Kurt to be at the table
when
here.
Kurt stepped up to the microphone, I figured.
Yeah,
he had
yeah. He's got something to
say.
say. We should all listen to it here.
Sure, yeah, the two pieces where that district maintenance comes into play. One is, as we're doing the 4K work that was part of the renovations, there's some district maintenance as part of those plans. So everything that we're doing at that 4K is not strictly renovating a classroom. There's some maintenance portions a part of that, right? So that captures a piece of it. The other piece of it is when we talked through the strategy leading up to the survey, we said our capital maintenance plan for the district, we're going to move forward and put our budgets together, handling that from operational dollars, right? If this project comes in under budget, if there's interest earnings that we can use for this project, there is a strategy that the board could decide to, by having the question listed that way, we could take some funds that is under budget and allocate to where the capital maintenance that was originally on our priority list. But what we didn't want to do is, as we put this plan together, make this number any larger than it had to be. But if we're under budget and the project goes well, we have that opportunity to do it with the way it's worded.
Thank you.
And so,
Sure.
so we know in this room that those improvements at the schools are for bringing 4K into our buildings. Is that something that is going to be given to the public, not in the referendum wording, but in the
Yes.
public publicity
Messaging.
of it, the messaging of it? Yep.
Yep, it'll be a major focus, like probably only second to the middle school part, right? But the projects go hand in hand. You can't really bring 4K in unless sixth grade moves out. So, of course, that will be a major component of the messaging.
I just didn't know if that needed to be have that as part of the wording. That's why I'm saying, I know that, I understand.
No, that's our job and our efforts between the moment you approve the resolution until April 5th or whatever the date slips my mind, I apologize. We'll have, 4 to 5 months of us communicating that, but that isn't necessarily embedded into the ballot language.
My last comment is whatever we need to do to get the middle school passed, we need to do. As far as leaving off something or putting more in, I think as long as the main goal is that, and to keep our focus on the main goal.
Anybody else? Crosby.
What is our contingency plan if this does not pass?
So we can, by asking one question now, what we can do between the April date and the subsequent November date is, with your permission, of course, is work with the community to say, we missed our mark, collect feedback as to what do you want, what do you want this project to look like? Did we include something that was unfavorable? Is there a way that we can reshape and rephrase and refocus our efforts to something that's more, favorable for the community? And then by asking one question now, we can refine that question and go back out in November and ask one more time. So both are high turnout elections, which, you're going to get the community's true, opinion on that. You're not using a February date or an August date. There's going to be a lot of people voting more than ever, more than likely. So like the community will truly be heard between the two dates that we have coming up here on the big election dates. So we can work to refine that and move forward.
Tom, we had all the community feedback at Big Bend, at I can't remember, they were everywhere. We had 4 dates maybe.
Yep.
And I thought they were well attended, and I thought the people were well spoken, and they asked good questions then. I think people that were involved then are still involved now. That's my opinion.
Okay.
Anybody else?
So without hearing any other feedback, what I'm going to do next week, Monday, is bring back the 2 final resolutions that you need to adopt to move forward to ultimately have that question that's on the screen there appear on ballots. Okay? So we'll include that in your packet, and a lot of it's more or less legal compliance. There are some lengthy resolutions, but at the end of the day, what that does is it puts that on the ballots. Okay?
Kurt, anything you want to add?
Nope, I just, as we went through this process, the input that this board and staff has received from community gives you the confidence to move forward like that, right? So we did a very good job. When you look back when we started this process, this group should feel pretty confident that I mean, there's variables out there, but certainly at this point in time, that resolution there reflects what we've heard.
Okay, so secondary question. The CTE program at Mukwonago has been phenomenal. Is that a separate discussion for next year?
As far as the high school project you're
Yeah.
talking? Yeah, I think it's a good, a wise idea to leave that off of this discussion as part of what we're looking at now. And yeah, if that's something that the board desires and feels like, it was weighted average 39% supported, and it's a priority of the board, reopening that up and talking through of, okay, what are we missing on that piece? It's close, but it's not quite there if we push forward now. So I think that's an option that the board could look at in the future.
Fair enough. Anybody else?
I would say that going forward, I think long-range facility planning should be somewhat of a regular topic at the board level. I don't think it's something like, oh, we did it, let's move on and go to other things for the next 4 years and forget about it. I think we should periodically come back to that. And that's not to say we're going to periodically consider referendums. I like to believe that we're going to get this thing done right, and this isn't a part of our normal, pathway forward. And that kind of is a segue to, as we talk about the 24-25 budget and a 5-year outlook, I do think that we'll have an opportunity to do projects in our district like CTE expansion, and if it becomes a priority of the board, that we can do that largely in the operating budget. So if we continue to talk about what do we need, what moves the needle on good outcomes for our kids in Mukwonago, we can do some of those things in the budget if it's your priority, what you want to do.
Good segue, Tom.
Yeah, you like that?
Yeah,
I-
very good.
I planned it that way.
Budget
so-
preview, please.
Okay, so I'm gonna
Cliff
just,
notes, maybe, just quick cliff notes?
yeah, Cliff Notes, you bet, you bet. All right. Okay, so what we're gonna do here, I have 3 exhibits, and I know there's a whole bunch of data on this screen. I'm not gonna go through all that stuff here, but we are gonna go through this here in January. On the first exhibit, what I have is that each one of these elements of the budget are assumptions that we have to guess. So we're gonna go in July and do the annual meeting and budget hearing, and we have to guess what's our third Friday counts in September going to be. Nobody knows for sure. There is no crystal ball, so we just got to take a best guess. I look back at last year's assumptions, so this column here represents here's what we assumed in April, and here's what it actually was in October. And then I just show the difference here as to what occurred and what the actual effect was on the budget, okay? So this is just kind of a look back to say, hey, we guessed, how good were we, right? So the big thing here, and I'm just going to try to make this a little bit bigger here. All right, so these dollar values here, per pupil and per member funding amounts. As we take a look at this here, we were making a budget thinking, hey, we're going to get $275 extra per pupil. And then for the first time in 31 years, the state government finally said, hey, the lowest funded school districts, we're going to move that minimum amount up to $11,000 and make a more even playing field. I did not see that happening. So while we thought we were going to get $275 extra per pupil, we got $984. Okay? At the end of the day, what we thought was when we do our revenue limit math, how many kids do we have? How much do we get for each of those kids? We thought we'd have a budget of $49.5 million. It wound up being 52.8. Okay? So how much of that amount is the state government going to give us? And you can see that's the equalization aid amount. We were really close, not quite, but we were close, okay? $180,000 less. And then you can say of the remaining amount, here's how the tax levy shakes out. You can see here that the tax levy grew by $1.5 million. However, we know that's going to be offset by $1.7 million increase in school levy tax credit. So it raises, but we said the net outcome is that throughout the district, the average taxpayer is going to see their tax bill go down, okay? So as we kind of go ahead here now, we have to start thinking about, well, what's going to happen in 24-25? We're at that stage where we're not even halfway through this school year, and we're already thinking ahead. In 24-25, we're in the second year of the biennial budget. So all these head counts here, these FTE counts of how many kids do we have, how many open enroll in and out, so on and so forth, we're going to have to make a guess as to what those counts are going to be. But the dollar value that we get for each of those counts is already known because we're entering the second year of the biennial budget, and every other year we have to guess at these. But this year, what's in blue here, we know we're going to receive $11,325 per student. That's a big assumption, but it's not an assumption this year, it's a known, okay? So we will work through this here in the January meeting to assume some values, but I just kind of want to give you a look back. So here we have 2021, 21-22, 22-23, and this current school year. So this just kind of gives you a little bit of a context. Again, summer school FTE, you can see 49 FTE during the COVID year, super low, and then it's really starting to blow up under Ben Casso's direction. So, you know, we can assume, hey, we're going to have 131 FTE, but if you look at the trend, you're like, hey, it's growing. If we want to build an accurate budget, let's make some best assumptions we can make. But that's coming our way. I'm going to get to the Cliff Notes right now and go quick with this here, but I want to be thorough, is that these values that you're seeing here in yellow and blue are what I am using in our 5-year budget projection. So here what I have is there's 3 scenarios here, all right? So we have the baseline scenario here, all right? We have scenario 1 here and scenario 2 at the bottom. The biggest thing that I just really want you to focus on here as you take a look at that here, and I know there's a lot of numbers on the screen, but there's a surplus deficit row, all right? This column here is budget year 24-25, and it's the same in all 3 scenarios because next year's funding amounts are known. The biggest difference is as we look out to the next 2 following biennial budgets, it's anybody's guess. How much money are we going to get? I don't know, and nobody does. The first scenario is if we receive $325 per pupil each year, So if we take a look at this here, it's going to say the per pupil increase, 325, 325, 325. Current state law says we're going to get a $325 increase each year for the next 400 years. I do have my doubts that that actually happens, but as a starting point, there it is. If we were to get $325 extra per year, you can see our surplus or deficit. This amount here, this $1.7 million surplus, this is what we would use to accomplish our 30-year, our 10-year capital plan. So it's like, wow, you got $1.7 million. That's a lot of money. Rolling Hills is just over 20 years old now, and they need a new roof. It costs $1.7 million. So we're already going to do the roof at Clarendon this year, a portion at the high school, and that's $3.7 million. Roofs are a lot of money. Buildings are a lot of money. So this surplus you see as we move into the future, these are the amounts that we would use to attack and keep our buildings great. However, I do think that there's opportunity that if they were like, hey, we would like to expand the autos program at Mukwonago High School or the small engines program, or you pick it, we'll have that opportunity. That can be a conversation we can have. If I scroll down now to the next scenario, you can see it, 325 next year and then 250 each year following. And you can see if you look at that surplus deficit row that's in bold here, those amounts start to shrink, okay? So sure, there's a little bit money in the coming years, but that starts to go away. This last scenario is if we get $325 next year and then $150 each year thereafter. And you can see we have surplus, surplus, deficit, 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 and those deficits grow. And I don't want to paint alarm, but the biggest variable in all this is the per pupil funding amount. Inflation's going to occur. We know that. Costs will go up. But we have to somehow, some way build a 5-year forecast that is reasonable. But the biggest variable in that is, well, how much money per student will we get in 27, 28, and beyond? It's like, well, let's just take a guess and have some scenarios ready to go. As you look at the 24-25 budget year in all three scenarios, they're identical. They're similar. There's no difference. As we enter next year, we're in a very, very good spot. And I'm happy to say that there's no concern. So that's great. I think in the immediate future, in the coming years after, we're still in a good spot. But if state government says, 2 years, 4 years from now, we can neglect the per pupil amount, we fixed it back in 23, 24, we don't got to do anything about it again, we're all going to come through with problems. That's just the nature of it all. We went through a number of years where there was no funding increases, and we weathered those storms. So even when I say, hey, there's a deficit, well, we'll find ways to fix the deficit. We're not going to build a deficit-based budget in this community. That I know. I know what the community values are, I believe. So we'll make it happen, but I'll say that there's problems that can arise if the state government doesn't continue to make this somewhat of a priority. But if you have any questions about that 5-year forecast, please take a look at it. Send me an email. I'll be happy to walk through that. So we'll focus more on 24-25 specifically, kind of in a 1-year snapshot as we go forward from here. But I will always work and focus on the bigger picture here behind the scenes. And if you have questions about that, just let me know, okay?
All good? Thank you, Tom. Rachel, hires, retirements, resignations.
All right, we have Sally Bisworm, who was offered a limited term contract as a 50% speech and language pathologist. We had a resignation from Zachary Wolfel. He was a special education teacher at the high school. And then we had 3 employees submit a notice of retirement. Lisa Conway, who was a section elementary instructional coach. Christine Polson, who was a 4th grade teacher also at section elementary. And John Stillman, who was an ELA teacher at Parkview Middle School.
We have a motion and a second.
I'll make a motion that we approve these hires, resignations.
Second it.
And thank you to those teachers with 30 years and 25 years. That's pretty
Carolyn,
incredible.
any discussion? Go ahead. Go ahead, say it again.
Thank you to the teachers that are retiring those 25 years and 30 years. That's really incredible.
Yeah.
I do want to give a shout out to Lisa Conway personally, as a father who sent his son to her in August for 2 weeks the last 3 years. She helped him read better and better. I'm always going to be grateful for Lisa. She did a great job. So if she's watching, thank you, Lisa.
Well, we don't have to let her go, do we?
You could say no. I'd be fine with that. She won't, though. She won't
Alright.
do that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
We're going to move into executive session for Wisconsin Stat 19.85, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data by a public employee over which a government body has jurisdiction or exercise responsibility.
I'll make a motion that we move into executive session.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Oh, yeah, roll call. Sorry. Thank you, Sherry.
Crosby?
Yes.
Erica?
Yes.
Jake?
Yes.
Dale? Yes. Vito?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
Craig?
Yes.
Sherry? Yes. Dale?